Good evening. I invite you to please be seated. Thanks for joining us. The second night, the attendance always tells us how the first night went. So Father Innocent looked like he passed the test. Some of y'all came back again, so it's great to be with you. There's a reality as Franciscans, right? We have this vow of poverty. And in our community, we do try and lean into it quite a bit. And so there's many things that we don't have in our houses, particularly with technology. We don't have television. We don't have internet in our friaries. Nobody has their own smartphone, cell phone, things like that. We're not streaming anything, right? So there's a lot of things that we don't have. But there's this whole other source of riches that we have. Certainly being here in South Louisiana and Lafayette, there is an unbelievable treasure and richness and wealth of relationship, of friendship, of hospitality, of butter and fat and oil and all of that. But it's true. It's true. There's just an overwhelming richness that's part of the grace and the beauty of our life. And it just points to the overwhelming generosity of God. That he really is a father who's never outdone in generosity. And whatever we offer him, he's always got more that he's repaying us. He's always got more. One of these riches, one of these wealths we have, one of the reasons that we don't miss TV even a little bit is because we live amongst and serve the poor, particularly in the South Bronx or in Harlem in New York. There's a whole cast of characters. Each one could be a star of a hit reality show, without a doubt, without a doubt. And it's a lot of fun. It's messy, but it's real, and it's beautiful. It's life. It's life. One of the there's a lot of stories. One of the stories, we have a blind. One of our neighbors is blind. She's this sweet African American woman who's a little bit edgy, and it's really cute because sometimes she'll knock on the friary because something happened on her cell phone and she can't see it to fix it. So, brother's I'm trying to make a call. Can you figure this thing out? And it's funny because we don't have cell phones either, and so it depends. Even myself now, I'm just about to turn 37. Yeah, of course I can work the cell phone. I get it. I have no idea how to do this. You calling one of the 25-year-old brothers, he does it real quick. But the guys had an idea of taking our neighbors, including Joanne, our blind neighbor, to the zoo, to the Bronx Zoo, right? And so it's really beautiful. Joanne's there, and we're sitting in front of one of the animal pens. She's okay, hey, so what are we looking at right now? She's it's a polar bear. It's oh, polar bears. I love polar bears. They're beautiful. What's it doing? Oh, it's just sort of laying there. That lazy polar bear. It's got to get up and be moving, What else is going on with the polar bear? Well, does it have a ball? It's yeah, it's got a yellow ball. It's got to be playing with that ball. Come on. Tell that polar bear to stop being so lazy. And then she tells the polar bear, right, to stop being so lazy. And it's beautiful. It's fun. It's real. It's life. It's the gospel. One of my personal favorite stories comes from when I was living in Honduras. As some of you heard me mention, from about 2012 to 2014, I lived in our friary in Honduras. I was, I guess, in my mid to late 20s at the time. And there is something about the poverty of this particular area of our neighborhood where really our mission in our life there is to be sons and brothers and fathers and uncles to kind of our whole neighborhood, our whole town. There's just so much need. And so we get invited to help with all sorts of things from moving to having a little conversation with one of their sons who's maybe kind of acting up, things like that, providing, etc. There was one invitation of help, which was pushing as far as we can go. And it was one afternoon. It was myself, and it was at the time Brother Gabriel. I'm a Orange County Country Club kid. Brother Gabriel's the son of a banker in Illinois. We're kind of spoiled, soft kids, right? And we get a knock on the door, and we open the door, and it's two of our social workers. We have a couple of women social workers that we work with to help with the women in the neighborhood. one of them's about 50 years old. She has her own children. The other's in her like early 20s. And they knock on the door and say, "Hey, brothers, we need your help." Okay, what can we do? Suyapa is going into labor, and she needs someone to drive her to the hospital. Suyapa is one of our neighbors who we've known forever. And she's just been through a lot. She was pregnant with her 10th child. During her pregnancy, she lost her husband. During her pregnancy, she broke her arm. She had this huge cast. And so she needed a ride to the hospital. And she just had no way of getting there. And so we get out our truck, our Toyota Hilux, the two social workers, they hop in the bed of the truck. We drive on over to Suyapa's house. She gets in. And here's where some of the details, I'm not an expert on pregnancy, so I'm going to say some stuff. You can fact check me, you know. But she gets in, and she all of a sudden it's like, oh, she is in labor. Like this is happening soon. And so they get in, and the first thing is one of the social workers asks her like, when did you start having contractions or whatever? And she's like, oh, I don't know. It was like, whatever, 8 o'clock. And at this point, it's like 2:30 in the afternoon, 3 o'clock. And we're like, and her response was like, what's wrong with you, woman? Something like that. I don't know if you can be how that works, but she was in it. The baby was coming. And so she's sweating and she's making all the pregnancy sounds, and we're driving the truck on this old back road, dirt road, and in every little dip, it's like, oh! Me and Brother Gabriel in the front are looking at each other like, what is happening right now? And it's about 10 minutes out of the dirt, and every bump, and it's like, we're sorry, we're not trying to hurt you. And this is like the kicker. The kicker is right before we were about to get on the main paved road, which is just kind of this last like 3-minute drive to the hospital. The social worker says, "Hey brothers, can you let us off here?" It's like, excuse me? Yeah, you can let us out, we're gonna go back to work. And we're like looking at each other. You realize what's happening right now. We have this woman in labor. We're a couple of American country club kids, and they were totally serious. And they got out and they started walking back to their office, and it was just me and Brother Gabriel and Suyapa. And so we did. We drove her. We got her into the hospital. I walked her in, and she, by baby number 10, everybody knows, oh, hey, Suyapa, we got your suite reserved over there. Come on in. Father Gabriel went and did some of the stuff that you have to pay for there in advance. And we just got back in the truck after that, and we just looked at each other like, bro, how did we get here? How did we get here? And I look back on it. Part of it is just wild. Part of it is like this kind of beautiful gift of being, if you will, living celibacy and consecrated chastity. There's certain life experiences you're not going to have. Driving a woman in labor to the hospital, not on the list, If that was not on my bucket list, if that would have stayed on the list, I would have been okay, but not on the list. And it's a fun story, and it is a way in which God is really alive and at work in the stuff of life. And I've joked about it at one of the masses, but it is a real thing. That often our preaching, it's like story time with Father Mark Mary or story time with Father Innocent. And it really is something that's part of our Franciscan preaching. And there's going to be different orders and different people who are going to be reading St. Thomas Aquinas, and they're talking about the divine simplicity and the life of the Trinity within itself, and the Father begetting the Son, inspiring the Holy Spirit, and all of that is good and true and beautiful and part of the patrimony of the Church. But there's something about the Franciscan life and the Franciscan call where our focus in our study and our prayer and our emphasis and our time and energy really goes into experiencing and contemplating God at work in history, God at work in the world, God at work in the life of Joanne in Harlem, God at work in Suyapa's life down in Honduras, God at work in our lives. And part of our following the Lord and how we follow him is to create this space, again, for him to be himself, to love us, to act in time, in history. And there's precedence for this, right? This is what how St. John begins his first letter. That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked upon and touched with our hands, concerning the word of life. The word was made manifest, and we saw it, and testify to it. This is the experience of the early disciples. This is the experience of the early evangelists. They're not talking about God as an idea or an abstraction. This is what they saw. This is what they heard. This is what they touched. This is what they experienced. And this is what we preach. This is what we preach. A God we know because we have seen him, we have heard him, we have touched him, and he has transformed our lives and captivated our hearts. Another story. And this is a story which it moves me deeply, and I'll share why in a second. But this is what we're going to do now is we're going to go to the South Bronx. And this is what God did and is doing in the South Bronx. In the South Bronx, we run a homeless shelter. I had a chance my first assignment as a priest was to work with the men at the shelter. Father Innocent had a chance to work there for a number of years. And it really is a front row seat to the work of God. And you just see him blessing and transforming and healing and guiding and caring for people in really incredible and beautiful ways. Our way of doing the shelter is we intentionally keep it somewhat small. Because we don't want just to have, and there's a place for this, but we just don't want a shelter that's feeding 250 men, giving 250 men a bed every night, but we don't know their names, and we don't know their stories. And so we keep it a little bit smaller so that we can really know them and love them and invest in them and sort of redeem and live family with them. And so one of the things that we do is we love to celebrate. At the very beginning, when you first come in and you do a little entrance interview, we're going to get your birthday. And when your birthday comes, we're going to get a cake, and we're going to cake with your name on it, and we're going to do candles, and with all of the men in the shelter, we're going to sing you happy birthday. On Thanksgiving, you're going to stay in all day. We're going to have a big turkey dinner, the best that we can make, and we're going to celebrate Thanksgiving with you. And on Christmas, one of the things that we do through the help of many generous people is we have all of these donations given to us. And so the top floors are all transformed, and we have a room that has shoes and socks and underwear and coats and hats and some snacks and goodies. So we do this party with Christmas carols and all of that Christmas Eve each year. And so it's Christmas Eve, and this Christmas Eve happens to be the first night of Fitz coming into our homeless shelter. Each night when we have a bed, someone is potentially able to come and to stay with us. And Fitz, who is joining us after just getting out of prison for the last 15 years. So he'd just been in prison the last 15 years, and it's his very first night out. And through God's providence, he ended up at our door, and we had a spot for him. And so he comes in, and during the entrance interview and our first sort of interaction with him, you can see the prison in him, right? You can see the prison in him, and because there is a dynamic of being in that setting where you're on edge. There's a defensiveness. There's an approach where you kind of have to be on the lookout because you don't know who your enemy is, and you sort of assume everyone is. And so there's this intensity to you, and you could see him kind of come in. And part of this is when we first go into the dining hall, he sits as far away from people as possible, not making eye contact, just again kind of in this mode of taking care of self-preservation. And then as this mysterious thing starts happening where, like, first of all, we all, we're there and we walk in, and you see all these other men coming into the shelter, And in some way, they looked similar to the men he had been imprisoned with, but they were smiling, right? And they're laughing, and they're serving one another, and they're looking out for one another, and they're introducing themselves. And right away, you can start to see like the questioning in his face, and his face begins to transform and soften a little bit. And we have the meal, and it kind of keeps going on, and as he's just taking it all in, he just softens and softens and softens. And so dinner ends, and we take him up to the hall where there's friars dressed in Santa hats, there's a keyboard, there are song sheets for Christmas carols, and then we just go with these 35 homeless men from all over the world. We just start singing Jingle Bells and I don't know, Rudolph and all of that, right? And they're sitting up and they're dancing and they're doing the whole thing, and you just see him again. It's just like what is happening, And he never gets to the point where he's singing or dancing with us, but he's just taking it all in. And then we give them their bags, and we begin where they can go in and they can get their Christmas presents. And part of the way of adding a little dignity to it is you can go in and you can choose. So you can have one coat, but you get to choose which coat. You get to choose the shirt. You get to choose the shoes. And so one by one, and towards the very end, again, because he's still sitting at the back of the room, it's Fitz's turn. And so Fitz goes and he gets his bag, and he walks through, and we're not, some guys are in the rooms, but I'm not like following him. And then finally he comes back. He comes back, and he takes his seat. And at this time, guys are eating cookies and drinking juice and whatnot. And Fitz is just in the back at the bench with his bag between his legs, hunched over with his face in his hands. And we kind of observe him for a second, and one of the brothers goes over, and he kind of sits next to him, like, "Hey, Fitz, are you doing all right?" And you can hear him crying. It's just too much. It's just too much. It's just too much. He was just overwhelmed. He was overwhelmed by the gifts. He was overwhelmed by the providence of God. And he was just sort of given back a reminder of his dignity and his worth. And he was just overwhelmed. It was just too much. It was just too much. And I love this story for two reasons. One is because if I gave my autobiography, I would want to do it basically by telling this story. This is my lived experience of making mistakes, of being a sinner, and just being loved with an incredible love of God. That's just too much. It's just too much. But what I love about it as well is the way in which it's just this real life experience of the parable of the prodigal son, right? There's the son who squanders his inheritance, who goes to a distant land, right? And when he returns home, he's not met with a chastisement or anger, a list of debts to pay, a closed door, right? He's met with gifts and a celebration and music and dancing. This is how God in the Gospels says he loves us. And in the South Bronx, Christmas Eve, for Fitz, he experienced, this isn't just an idea, this is something he has seen and heard and touched and experienced for himself. And this is my experience. This is our God. This is our God. And there's few, if any, gospel accounts or passages which speak to me as deeply and move me as deeply as the story of the prodigal son. One side effect of that is that I have some strong opinions on artwork depicting this little experience, right? And I haven't gotten myself in trouble, but I've picked some fights with some very favorite, well-known prodigal son images. I get it, like artists, you know, there's artistic liberty, you're not just necessarily like saying exactly what happened. But not as an artist, but as a priest, there's just a real desire to get it right. Because if you look at most images of the prodigal son, there's a variety of expressions of it. What it is basically this. There's sort of right in the background is the house, is the father's house, and there's the son who's returning home, who's kneeling down, and his father's there, still sort of dressed slightly regally, with compassion, placing his hands on the son's shoulders. But it feels stoic. It feels a little bit too indifferent. And it's just not actually what the gospel says. And it's good for us to be reminded of what does the gospel say about our Heavenly Father and his approach to us in our sinfulness, in our weakness, in our brokenness, in the parable of the prodigal son. It says this: "The son arose and began coming to his father, but while he was yet at a distance, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son begins to say, 'Father, I have sinned against you.' And the father, he interrupts him. And he says, 'Bring quickly my best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and make merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again.' While he is yet at a distance, the father has compassion and sees him. And even if from your own hearts as fathers and mothers, the father runs to him, and the father's crying, and the father's his robes, his sandals are off his feet, his robe is off, and he is running, and he is sweating, and he is ugly crying, and he is falling at the feet of his son, who was dead and is now alive. There is no indifference, there is no stoicism in the heart of God towards his suffering children. I'm going to share another story which for me communicates this most eloquently and convincingly and beautifully. And it's the story of Josie and Papa. And it's a true story, and it's a story I heard while sitting next to one of Papa's granddaughters. And Papa, Thomas Vanderwoody, was just a man's man through and through. After he retired from his service in the Navy, he would get married and live on a farm. And every day he'd wake up early in the morning, about 4:30, 5 o'clock, every day, and run 5 miles before he went to his job at the school where he was the athletic director. And Papa would, again, he was just the man who did hard things. And when he wasn't at the school working with the kids, he was back on the farm. And one of the things he did, he was a man who also was a great man of faith. And one expression of this is that at the nearby Perpetual Adoration Chapel, every Tuesday night, he would take the 2 to 3 a.m. Adoration slot. It was the hardest slot. He wanted to take that spot. And that's just kind of the man he was and how he lived. Papa he'd get married, and he'd have 5 boys. And as fathers do, he loved all of his sons, right? But there was one of them which had this particular place in Papa's heart. And that was his son Joseph, who they called Josie. And Josie was born with Down syndrome. And so Josie, of course, needed some extra attention. Josie needed some extra resources and time and energy. And Josie, right, Josie was never gonna grow up, get married, have a family, cure cancer, join the Navy. Josie, in his condition, he was going to be at home. And one aspect of having Down syndrome, from my understanding of it, is that there's certain things that people are doing, what kind of like speeds up and helps kind of the learning and the development process. And one of those, which can be stunted, or was in Josie's case, was crawling. And so the more he could be crawling, the faster his development was going to be. And so what Papa did is he had the special pads made for his elbows, for his wrists, for his knees. And him and Josie would just crawl and crawl and crawl and crawl. And this is Papa, the military man, the father of 5, the athletic director. He just humbled himself without a care in the world and crawled and crawled and crawled with Josie because he wanted to be with his son, and he was going to do whatever it took to love him and care for him, right? So Josie and Papa, they'd be around the farm. And while Papa's working, Josie would join him and help out as he would grow. And there's one day, they were taking down in the backyard, they were taking down the pool. And while Papa's doing the work of taking down the pool, Josie's there helping him. And they're over in an area they didn't normally go. And through some tragedy, which is still unknown, Josie fell in the septic tank for the farm. And so immediately, Papa, hearing the cry and seeing what happened, immediately he's crying out for his wife, and he jumps in the septic tank and gets below Josie. And he's just trying to push him up and keep him up and hold him as long as possible. And Josie wasn't was bigger at this time, right? And so the grandmother comes out and she's trying to help. And as time went on, they were able to get Josie out. But through exhaustion, through the fumes, Papa would end up drowning. And Papa would end up dying. When there was a funeral for Papa, people were coming to visit and pay their last respects for more than 10 hours. The Eucharistic Adoration Chapel has a plaque there with Papa and Josie, and they renamed the Adoration Chapel after him. His sons, one of them who became a priest, they've shared amongst themselves. They take that 2 to 3:30 Tuesday night perpetual adoration shift, and they just split it among themselves. Josie, again, Josie's not going to cure cancer. Josie's not going to raise a family. But Papa died for Josie. Why? Because that's what good fathers do. And what does he expect? Just that Josie lives, and laughs and loves and and receives loved. This is how good fathers love. This is how good fathers love. And my brothers and sisters, this story is not just for Josie. This reality is ours. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. God became man and crawled among us. And he took on the fullness of our humanity. Right? And the story of the prodigal son, this father's pursuit of his son, it's not just a parable, it's an event in history. The pursuit of the father for his lost son or daughter who is dead is the life of Jesus. This is Christ. This is the gospel. That he leaves the home in pursuit of us, moved with compassion, humbles himself before us, moved with love for us. And he takes on all of the sewage of all of human history, laying his life down on the cross. The pursuit of the Father for his Son and daughter, the pursuit of God for you and me, is Christ crucified. And on the cross, Jesus looks to the good thief and he says, what? Today you will be with me in paradise. I have come for you to bring you home. And today there will be eating and drinking and dancing and celebration in paradise for eternity. And why does he come and love us like this? Because that is how fathers love. Because that is how Jesus loves. And what does he expect? Does he expect us to experience this, receive this gift with guilt and self-condemnation? But no, as Papa loves Josie, he just wants us to live and to love and to receive the gift and to receive the truth of who we are. We are loved with so great a love. We are loved with so great a love. And this is the truth of who we are. And this is the truth of who God is. And one final word is part of why I experienced this so deeply, is how I experienced this in my own life, in my own vocation. And I'm going to speak personally, knowing that this experience is not limited to myself, but represents that of many of my brother priests. Yesterday we talked about this reality that Christianity is this reality, this religion, this faith where God comes in pursuit of us, and it continues fully and beautifully and most perfectly in the most holy sacrament of the altar, the Blessed Sacrament. That Jesus' pursuit, desire to be with us, Emmanuel, happens truly here. My friends, Jesus' pursuit of us continues to happen through the gift of the most holy priesthood and the sacrament of confession. And part of why I struggle with the prodigal son images, right, is for many of us, this is our experience of the church. We can feel like God and the church and our priests are indifferent towards us, stoic before us. And if we come, they're happy to welcome us back. But if you don't, we just go along our business. And you have the experience, right, of coming to confession, of looking up the time, getting in your car, driving to church, waiting 10 minutes. Father's there waiting. You give him your sins, and then you leave. And it certainly can feel like us coming and pursuing this sacrament. But my brothers and sisters, what I want to tell you about in my experience is this, is I have the experience of as being an 18-year-old young man feeling called to the priesthood and having this desire to be present, to make God's mercy present as a priest in the confessional. And I have the experience of breaking up with a young woman who I loved so I can be a priest and make this gift available. And I have the experience of leaving my family and traveling to New York and going through 9 years of formation and studies. And all of this is Christ in me pursuing you and pursuing this sacrament. And when you come to my confessional, what you don't experience, but what I experience, is that I've been pursuing you and this moment for the last 18 years of my life. And giving everything I have for this one desire, to make Christ and his mercy present for you, to receive this gift, which is just too much. My brothers and sisters, I don't expect anything from you. I just want you to take advantage of the gift, to receive the gift of his mercy and his pursuit, and to know that you are worth pursuing, not just in your strengths and in your weaknesses, or your strengths and your achievements and your successes, but what draws Christ most to you, what draws me most to you, is your brokenness and your healing, your brokenness and your sinfulness, and your need for a Savior. This is just the reality and the beauty of our faith. And this is the beauty and the goodness in the heart of our Father, who is the best of fathers and who is here with us.